And I think a lot of people are thinking about it. I think one of the big things that I always tell people to do is to look at your carrier set. There's, speaking US specifically, and then broaden this out as well, but US specifically, UPS and FedEx have both had about a 6% price rise this year. Because one of the big things and one of the takeaways that does apply globally is look at some of these regional carriers. So if you look at like a Uni, for example, they are a regional player that's done really well with TikTok Shop.
You're listening to Inside Commerce, a weekly e-com strategy, technology and CX focused podcast hosted by experienced digital consultants and re-platform specialists James Gedd and Paul Rogers. Get insights into e-com strategy of leading brands, hear from industry thought leaders and leading tech vendors with practical advice to help you improve your online CX. This episode is sponsored by Shopify. We are diving into a really important topic, exceptionally topical. It's always topical, to be honest, and it's the Shipping E-commerce Challenge, which is building resilience into your shipping strategy. And really happy to welcome back a guest who joined us we're just trying to work out exactly when, but it was a good few years back. So warm welcome to Quentin Montalto, who's a COO at ShipperHQ. Hey, Quentin.
Thanks for having me back, James. I appreciate it.
Look, really, really glad to do this. Let me just set up the episode for a bit, and then we'll get into a bit about your story, and then also we'll get into some really exciting questions about shipping strategy and where ShipperHQ is headed. So, for those listening, the focus today is on thought leadership around shipping trends. Quentin and the team at ShipperHQ are incredibly well placed to see how the shipping challenges are evolving globally, what e-com teams are focused on, and also having that kind of end-to-end vision of being able to know where the pain points are and what people are doing and how they can solve them. So this includes like regional variations, operational challenges. And there are timely angles to consider. We're in the throes of back to school shopping season. For those of you like us who are crazy enough to have kids, we're getting closer to peak, or it feels like most people are planning for peak all year round. And then we've got the glorious word of tariffs, which continue to evolve practically daily. Lots of forces at play, impacting sales performance basically as we are into Q4. And then more specific to ShipperHQ, they're a market leader. They're constantly innovating, and they've just launched a new ship to store feature. So we're going to talk about the benefits of that and what adding ship to store functionality looks like to merchants and also operational considerations. So that's our setup. So why don't we, for those who haven't met you and know who you are and what ShipperHQ is, let's start with that, Quentin. Do you want to just give a little bit of a background? Because you've had an interesting career at ShipperHQ, from support engineer to now COO. So do you want to have people a bit of a backstory about you, and also like a nice succinct way of positioning ShipperHQ? Who are you and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks, James, for having me again. I think I looked it up. I think I was podcast number like 40 something was the first time I was on here. So good things, a lot of things have changed. So like James mentioned, my name is Quentin. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at ShipperHQ. I'm celebrating my 10 years here next month. So very excited about that. I focus mostly on like go-to-market partnerships, sales side of the house. It's kind of where I live. As a product, we focus on the shipping experience on the website. So like a lot of companies with ship in the name, it's a little bit misleading sometimes. What we do is we focus on the experience at the checkout. So our job is to bring that supply chain business decisions of how shipping works into the checkout in a simple way. So it's as simple as, I want to show a delivery date. I need to take into account cartonization. Over the last, our company's been around since 2008, but over the last probably 7 to 8 years, especially pre-COVID, COVID accelerated, a lot of people realize that they're leaving a lot of money on the table as far as how their rating goes, because the native platforms don't have any depth and solution. And there's easy ways just for us to simply calculate things accordingly. So we focused on that, and that's been what we've been doing since 2008. And it's a great place to be. It gives us the opportunity to partner with great people that generate the labels and tracking to kind of finish the supply chain, if you will.
Fact, do you know what? That's an incredibly concise way of explaining something that's actually very, very complex, because I know your product has a lot of nuance to it. And as somebody who works with a lot of retail businesses around replatforming or tech stack decisions, one of the things that often surprises people is when they have complex shipping logic, how challenging it is to achieve natively in a platform without extensive custom coding, which can then cause performance issues in checkouts, or it can cause maintenance issues. So I can definitely attest to that. I'm working with someone at the moment where there's issues around estimated dates related to batches, and then you suddenly realize that shipping is not this one single thing where you just need to plug in carriers. There's lots of nuance and logic in there.
I think it used to be seen as that. It used to just be like, hey, it's flat rate, it's free shipping. And then, everyone was shipping at a higher volume during COVID, and which was a great thing. I think it was a really good, and for us, it sort of solidified the importance of logistics on the website. And as the carriers have changed contracts and as people have become more competitive, I think people are just looking at where margins are. And people are starting to realize like, hey, you know, I'm looking at my UPS invoice, just to pick on them for a second. I see my dimensional corrections are, you know, thousands of dollars. So, you know, sometimes we're not asking people to spend anything. We're showing people how we can save them things just by simply saying, hey, we're not calculating this correctly. So we don't have a magic wand. Logistics is always going to be inherently hard, but the level of intelligence around that part of the supply chain just hasn't really been optimized yet. And that's the area and why, you know, I'm 10 years in with 10 more on the horizon, because there's still a lot more we can do around this.
Yeah, there is. And this is why I think people listening are going to get a lot of value out of this, because it's constantly shifting, and not just the tariff chaos that's doing it, but changes in customer expectations, changes in market conditions, changes in like global trade friction. All of these things have impacts on supply chain, which impacts shipping, which impacts technology decisions. So it's an area where you can't stay still, basically, as a retailer if you want to be competitive.
Yeah, because nothing's staying still for it. I mean, like the de minimis is ending this week, or depending on when this comes out, is ending imminently. And you know, there's 25 local carriers that are saying, hey, we're not shipping to the US because of the uncertainty to it. So there's always, you know, we're not just going against, you know, I build a pretty website, I get my contract with UPS, I make my search as good as possible. You're now kind of going against the underlying. I mean, you're going against the government in a way, not in the sense of like a revolt, but you know, you do have to consider how these packages are going to get to your country and where they're coming from and what's the actual cost going to be there.
Well, as a country that foisted Brexit on Europe and the world, and the impact that's had on trade disruption, I can attest to and sympathise with the impact that tariffs are having on US and other country trade, and also the de minimis thing. There's many articles this week in the UK. So this is due to go out the week after this came into, I think, if I work out my timings. Yeah. And there's loads of small businesses now saying how they are stopping shipping to the US because actually the margin impact, they cannot afford it anymore, and they're having to take stock. And some people have said they're losing 30% of their business overnight. And which is why we're going to get onto about, which is why the topic's about building resilience, because if you are reliant on one area, that's a single point of failure and you are screwed. And that dovetails us nicely into like my first question. And you've already touched on one element of it, the change de minimis. But what are the main challenges that you see e-com retailers facing with shipping now in 2025? And like, how has this changed? How are these challenges changing?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest, this problem, it's a constant problem, but I think it's at expectation versus cost. You know, I think a lot of us are conditioned to want items to arrive as soon as possible because we shop on Amazon, or you shop on one of like the big box retailers that now has a much slicker checkout experience. Like they're going to show you the delivery date, they're going to show you click and collect. They're pushing effectively the narrative of how shipping should operate on a checkout. And I think for any businesses, small, medium, and large, we're kind of catching up to that. And now the definition of fast is the big piece that's there. You know, is fast 2 days or is fast overnight? You know, 63% of people are saying, hey, I'll switch to a different retailer if I can get it faster. It's a big percentage. And if you don't have, you know, for example, showing when that is, you know, you're pretty much gambling in that checkout. Like, hey, if I don't have that, it's actually a little bit better than a 50-50 shot that customer is going to bounce to that. So that to me is probably the biggest one, because it's ever changing. You know, it's going to go back to that drone thing like we talked about before you started recording. You know, in 10 years time or 5 years when we do this again, you know, it might be this situation of, hey, everyone's expecting drone delivery within 5 hours at that point, because Amazon facilities are popping up everywhere. There's one 15 minutes north of where I live, and there's one 45 minutes south of where I live. It's crazy. You can get anything in like 5 hours.
What do Mattel, Victoria Beckham, Sennheiser, and Glossier all have in common? They power their businesses with Shopify. Shopify is the most innovative and scaled commerce platform on the planet. It also happens to have the best converting checkout on the planet. Shopify, powering the future of enterprise commerce. Find out more at shopify.com/enterprise.
Yeah, and it's that last mile bit is critical. There's all sorts of, we're going to come on to a bit of that later, but yeah, the drone one's fascinating, because if you go out to China, then they're already further down the line on this. simply because of the geographic spread and how they need to get things from more remote regions. So I find it fascinating. And we talked about tariffs and de minimis and tariffs. There's lots of stuff having an impact. And also, we both mentioned that it has an impact on people's trading strategies, where they decide they might ship, or even the carriers they can ship to. What are the impacts you're seeing on supply chains? What's the overall mood that you're gauging out there? Are people panicking? Are people shutting down? Or are we just in a period of settlement?
So I'll kind of speak to this in looking at sort of two markets. I think one of the markets on the SMB side of things, like this year, I have seen businesses shut down. Like when we talk to customers as they look to transition away from our solution, like every SaaS provider, you ask why. And we're seeing these customers on our smaller plans saying we're shutting our doors. And that's not shutting their doors in the sense of like, some of them is the whole business is shutting down. Some of it is like, hey, we're brick and mortar. We're just going to stick to that. We know that. The trade of shipping packages is hard. Come find us. So on the smaller side, we are absolutely seeing businesses shut down, and it's a sad day. And it's something that, we try to take our role as, trying to protect small businesses very seriously. We're a small company. We're not privately owned. We are privately owned. We don't have like an overlord above us. So we take that very seriously. And on the other side of things, like the mid-market to enterprise, we're seeing people pause. So I think you're seeing strategic pauses versus anything else past that, because they're saying, hey, look, for me to order inventory cycles every 90 or so days, people missed a couple of the cycles. Because if you think back to the tariff chaos 3 months ago, some people weren't ordering. So some of the things that we're seeing customers say right now, especially, is what is going to be our Black Friday products to sell? Because generally you're selling your overstock, you're selling the colors that didn't sell well for you. I think right now a lot of people are very critically looking at what inventory do I have? How can I make that impactful of that sale? Because they say 30% of a customer's revenue comes from Black Friday. If they don't have that revenue to discount, then there's a bit of a gap there. So I think a lot of people right now are just assessing that situation. What is my average cost price of the items I have today in my warehouse versus what's my buy rate for these new items? Okay, what's the average of cost those going to be for me to be able to offer discounts? Could I even offer a discount this year?
What mood are you sensing in the US? Because obviously, we live in different parts of the world. We get different angles and different slants on what the impact and how this is going to play out. And one of the angles that I think is underplayed is the impact on US consumers, because tariffs, okay, it's protectionism against business, but and it will stop some players at being able to ship and sell into the US market. But fundamentally, the price goes up for those who continue to sell, and retailers aren't going to take the hit on everything. They can't afford to. So what's the market mood amongst consumers? Are people a little bit worried that costs going to shoot up across key products?
Well, they absolutely are. I mean, because one of the things our president said is to tighten your belts. He said, "Hey, get ready for it. This is better for America." So, like, there is, without going too far into that way, but there is an element of, there's an acknowledgement from our leadership that, hey, this is going to happen. I think some of the things that we're seeing our merchants do is, we rolled out the ability for customers to show the tariff surcharges for a particular product. So if you're buying something that's automotive, it's a pretty scrutinized vertical as far as the tariffs go. Show that transparency to the checkout. The shipping includes a 15% tariff fee. So what we're seeing customers do is try their best to just lead with transparency and empathy and saying, hey, this product now costs more. Here's what the cost is. Showing nobody in the world are tariffs going to be new unless you're waking up from a coma that you went into a year ago. Even before that, tariffs were a thing, but like how much they have changed is something that everyone sees, and I think everyone's trying to adapt to. If you look at the big box retailers like the Best Buys, like the Apples, they're now talking about how they're going to start offloading the tariffs back down to the merchants, because right now they were kind of eating those costs and they're adding up for them as well. So now they're looking at it and going, hey, we're going to have to pass these down. And I think that's where like the SMB and mid-market and enterprise on a, below Fortune 500, that's what they're looking at doing right now. Like, how do you do that? Do you bake it into the product? Do you pass it into the shipping? However you're doing it needs to be dynamic. So we're seeing US consumers be a bit more mindful of where are we spending from and how are we spending from, and where is that item coming from. I think some people are now asking, like, what is the country of origin of this? Not in the sense of like a national pride thing, but I think now people are aware, like, hey, if this is shipping from another country, I might have to pay more.
Yeah. Yeah, and also the I guess the big challenge for retailers who don't have the expertise in this area and who are used to rely on shipping duty unpaid, and therefore it's the customer's responsibility.
Yep.
They're going to get a nasty surprise in their return loops.
Yeah. Has that ever happened to you before where you buy a package, it's delivery duties unpaid, then they just kind of go like, hey, it's $50 for your package. It's like a ransom.
So, me personally, no. But I do know people who have ordered something that's like a $20 item come across, and then they've had to pay nearly the same amount of money on collection. And some people, if it's an urgent, like distress purchase, or it's like a special purchase for like a present, people will just suck it up, but they'll be pissed off, and that will probably stop them ever shopping with that retailer again for cross border. But those who go, well, I quite fancied it, but I'm not that fussed, will just reject it. And then it sits there. And then you've got the whole thing of, well, actually it's sunk cost because the retailer's got to really take that back. Then you get into the question of, does the retailer refund, or do they refuse to refund? Or like, what's the reason for that return? And it's pretty messy.
That exact use case is why those smaller regional carriers, like the, Thailand, Japan, a few of the other countries aren't shipping to the US. That's exactly why. Like with the de minimis $800 threshold going away, they don't want to have that conflict of like, hey, you owe us an extra $60. They don't want to pay that cost for it to get there and then how to get back to it. But the same thing happened to me when I first started at ShipperHQ. I decided like, hey, I'm going to be in tech. I'm going to get like a nice like leather satchel. I did that, waited like a month and a half, and I got there, and the DHL guy was like, you owe me $70. I was like, no, I already paid for it. This is before I knew anything like really about logistics. Like, no, I already paid for it. And then I thought he was like trying to rip me off. And I was like, this seems crazy. And then I had this whole moment where I was like, I'm not going to pay you more money. And then I like called, I was like, take the package, leave. And I called, and then I looked it up. And then I remember I was talking to Daniel Ziegler on our team. I was like, hey, Daniel, have you ever heard of this situation? And that's when I learned what tariffs and taxes were. So that's like that's my story. I tell people like, this can happen. You feel like you're being robbed, because I really thought I was being like, I thought the mob was running DHL or something.
But your point you made earlier about the way that some people reacted and being very transparent and highlighting that cost specifically, this to me is a criticality for success in retail. Is you have to be transparent. You have to tell consumers how it's getting to them. Like you said earlier about the speed, the time, even if it's an estimate, to give them some expectation. And you've got to set the cost. And if there are potential additional costs, you've got to tell them. And there are tools online where even apps where it will give an estimate, even if it's not 100% accurate, but it's better than nothing. I mean, obviously, shipping duty paid is the ultimate way you should be going, and the tech is there to do it. But I think transparency is critical. So if you set a realistic expectation, if you're slightly off, consumers are not going to be as pissed off if they suddenly get a surprise thrown at them.
Well, it's better to be slightly off and off altogether. And I think the DDU, the delivery duties unpaid days, are just over. One of the things that we really prided ourselves with, I think we had a little bit of foresight, is last year we partnered with DHL Ecommerce to give a duties and taxes calculator, just in the sense of like, we need something for a crawl, walk, run approach for customers it's brand new to them, that they don't have all their HS codes. They just want to set a default one. Great, cool. If you know them all, great. We can be more accurate. It's one of those things that you get in what you get out of it. But it's exactly that. It's better to be closer than to be where you are today. And that product for those customers that need to get closer is excellent. Those customers that are, hey, I do duties and taxes. I do a lot of international. The first customer I actually put on it was a customer based in Ireland that shipped, exclusively to Europe, had multiple warehouses, had the situation where, this warehouse serves this region, this warehouse serves that region, because we were mapping it against saying, hey, I can pay, if I ship out of this warehouse, it's less of a tax if I ship out of the Ireland warehouse. So we did all the mapping of that, because those are just the examples of like, you just don't have to pay it. If you have the business logic there, you can just skirt out of paying those fees that, other people are going to absorb.
Yeah, it's interesting actually seeing, I have a business I've worked with, fashion retailer, and they put a hold on their US ops whilst they sorted out 3PL in the US to have local distribution, to reduce the in-country taxes, to reduce the cost of shipping, and therefore keep the pricing as close as they could to existing pricing, versus everything being shipped in directly from an external warehouse outside the US. And it doesn't get around things like the country origin stuff, but it does help massively from a local tax point of view.
You can hopefully clear in bulk as well, depending on how you're clearing it. Like if you're, you can likely clear, you're not going to clear, 10 shirts a piece. You might be able to clear a package of 10. So there's some other ways around grouping that together that makes it easier, but that's a great approach.
So let's extend this conversation about resilience and shipping strategies. We talk. I mean, you've got political decision making around the world that impacts it. You've got war zones. You've got other impacts that cause disruption to supply chains, where like shipping lanes get blocked, containers get delayed. There's a massive impact. And if you only have one specific route to market and that goes down or gets delayed, it's fundamentally screwed your inventory management up and your ability to sell through channel and all of and then the knock-on impact. So how do you see people building resilience in, and what was your advice? What are the right ways to create resilience in your network?
Yeah, that's kind of like $1 million question right now. And I think a lot of people are thinking about it. I think one of the big things that I always tell people to do is to look at your carrier set. There's, speaking US specifically, and then broaden this out as well, but US specifically, UPS and FedEx have both had about a 6% price rise this year. So you're seeing the average price of anything go up. That goes anywhere from a ground package to an overnight. There's percentage increases within that. And I think it's always worth telling people, like, take a look at what you're signing on to. Take a look at your package volume. Take a look at like what zones you're shipping to the most. Like the US is broken into 9 zones, 8 zones. Where are you shipping to the most? Because one of the big things and one of the takeaways that does apply globally is look at some of these regional carriers. So if you look at like a Uni, for example, they are a regional player that's done really well with TikTok Shop. Like I would start to notice as these TikTok Shop packages would show up at our house for our son, different labels like Piggy Post. And I was like, what the hell is that? And you start to look at these carriers and you start to realize, okay, these people are stitching together these regional lanes because they have the volume that's there. So looking at that, there's savings within those regional lanes because they're saying, look, I own this area. I own the Southeast. I don't go anywhere else beyond that. And, there's 10 to 35% on average savings of looking at those regional carriers. So the big thing I would say is like, look at where you're shipping to and look at who's dominating that area and look how you can either shift volume. Being a centric shop to UPS and FedEx also does have amazing advantages. If you have loyalty with them, it's kind of like credit card points in a way. Like each one of them has a system where you guys can get free software, free technologies, and get discounts. So there's not one way or another. It's like you don't need to like microservices your carriers and say, hey, these carriers are going to go this side, these carriers are going to go that side. But there is value to, if you are shipping in a particular area, look at what those regional carriers can do for you.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's amazing actually how I guess fragmented the market's become in terms of the number of carrier options there are. I remember, I've been in e-com for about 20 years. And I definitely remember the first days of shipping. It was very, very straightforward decision making.
Yep. Yeah. Royal Mail, USPS, UPS, DHL for international. Then it was Hermes, and they've all popped up. And then is it InPost? InPost just acquired somebody's, I can't remember who they just acquired somebody as well. So like there's a consolidation and a split happening at the same time because there was a lot of, the regional carriers. That was a big thing that popped up like, hey, we serve the metro area, we serve this, we serve that. There's a lot of what the US logistics learnings comes from are what you guys are doing in the UK. Because the way that you guys do, click and collect, the way that you guys do locker pickup, the way that you guys do like the local courier handling, that stuff has like a delay. It's almost like, I don't know if you ever knew this, like tap cards. Tap cards were in the UK like 10 years before they were in the US. So I used to have to put my chip in my card and have to sign for every time I went to the UK. So you guys are always like leading in these ways. And then we bring it over here and then we adopt it. And where the adoption struggles is in our, larger city areas, Chicago, New York City, the locker systems work. But if you look at Austin, where I'm based, we're a little bit too sprawled out. Like you have to be in the car to make those changes happen. But seeing how you guys sort of lead that way to me is always interesting because you guys have, the bike carriers, the parcel carriers, like the Uber delivery, like that thing is so dialed in that's there. And that's one of the things that, if you transpose that to the US, that's kind of how our regional carriers operate in a way.
Yeah, and the benefit that we have in the UK is that we are much closer together, and like the big urban areas are closer together. So actually, transit between big urban centres is relatively straightforward. Whereas if you expand that out to the size of the US, especially like the mid US, which is just hours of driving across farmland, and you realise actually how complex it is to get things quickly between depots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a tricky one too. And then there's there's certain expectations. Like, if you're in the middle of Iowa, you're not getting a package this next day. So there's definitely an element of that. And then there's also like one of the things I would say that too is like, as you're looking at your strategy,
be realistic. If you are shipping something to, the Scottish Highlands, or you're shipping to Iowa, let's compare those two together. They're not expecting an overnight. And if they are, they're expecting it to be at an insanely high cost. So don't try to compete with yourself to areas where they just want the package.
Yeah, which comes back to your point about setting expectations. The last retailer I worked with that was very transparent, which was standard delivery 1 to 3 days. Scottish Highlands and Islands, remote regions with very specific postcodes, is 5 to 8 days. Mm-hmm. And the price is pretty similar. It wasn't much more expensive, but yeah, but they deliberately decided not to offer express services to those regions because the volumes are going to be so low. The costs would have to be disproportionately high, and actually they consider that to be not right for their customers.
Well, it goes into a turnoff point too. I mean, 81% of customers are still expecting free shipping. So if they're expecting to see free shipping, they don't see free shipping. They see the standard at one price and then the, expedited at, 3 times. They're going to look at it and go, man, these people are trying to rip me off. Even though they're not, they're just trying to get the package from A to B. But that's sort of some of the psychology, if you will, that can go into shipping.
And you touched on it earlier about some of the expectation around speed. And I always find it interesting because if I look at the data that I see speed as being a key driver because speed is normally linked to convenience, mm-hmm. but the speed people are willing to pay a premium for, whereas standard delivery they expect to have in a timely fashion. It used to be 5 days is right. 5 days is way too long. 1 to 3 days typically for standard delivery. And people might be willing to wait a little bit longer to have a free delivery. But it's the same day stuff that I'm seeing a growth in demand, and it's not for everything. You wouldn't want the same day in a furniture, right? You don't generally buy a sofa and go, shit, I need it today. There are all sorts of items where you might suddenly have a need of, oh God, I've forgotten this. I need to get this. I'm in London today and I need to get it. Where am I get it? Whether it's same day delivery to an address or it's collection from the store. How are you seeing? What are you seeing as the big trend areas for where shoppers are demanding and where merchants are really invested?
Yeah, I think that I think going back to sort of looking at this US and looking at it globally, I think on the US side of things, we're still not at the point of giving the overall transparency of when items are going to arrive. I think the big box retailers or the big brand names, the Fortune 100s are doing that, and everyone below that are still trying to look to adopt that. So we're not in a place where, if you're ordering something from, there's a company that's based here in Austin, Texas. They're called Tecovas. They're a boots company. They're, as far as I'm concerned, pretty ahead of the curve because they offer a delivery date at their checkout because their goal is to compete with the local. There's a lot of shops here that said boots, Jen. So I don't know if you've been to Austin.
Sorry, you just triggered my dog.
I was going to say, did we get a package? I was going to say, are you going to have to sign for it?
No, I don't know. There must be a keyword you've triggered, and he's obviously excited about shipping. Sorry.
He wants to chew on a leather boot. That's what it was. He wants to chew on a leather boot.
Sorry, please carry on, sir.
No, you're good. But what they do is they compete with brick and mortar because there's a lot of shops here that sell boots. So their whole big thing was, look, I want to show to a customer if we're going to order our boots, you can't go to the storeroom and touch and feel. I'll show you when they arrive and I'll tell you about a refund policy. So that way, no harm, no foul. If you can return it if you want, and then it'll be here in 3 days. So for them, that is still ahead of the curve for merchants. We're still not have that sort of overall adoption. So if I transpose out how you guys have same day, that probably translates to our second day or our overnight options are still not explicitly stated. There are some same days things that pop up, but it's generally through a Walmart Plus. It's through the Amazon, Whole Foods, which is owned by Amazon. Our local grocery chain here, it's called HEB. It's local to Texas, kind of like a Tesco Express, pretty big spot. They have that, but beyond that gulf in between the two of those things is it's massive because it's hard to do. If you look at a big commerce, you look at a Shopify, there's not a native way to hook in an Uber delivery or a Deliveroo. So whoever's doing that, you have to spend a pretty penny to have that happen. And then you have to look at what vertical makes sense for that. Generally food. And if you're doing food, then you would likely sell on an Uber Eats or Deliveroo directly. You wouldn't have your own presence online. And if you did, then you're at that sophistication point where you're sort of you're on the other side of that gulf of where the rest of the retailers are.
Yeah, and I think you alluded to earlier about the big box retailers. And I find it interesting you said about, the UK is ahead we get to technology solutions ahead of when the US is in some areas. But actually, I think the adoption rates in the big box retailers in the US is far quicker. When I look at last mile, which for me is an area I really want to probe on a bit more with you actually. Because I've always looked at the likes of like the Best Buys, for example, and Walmart, etc. There's been all these collabs of investment with like local networks and last mile to improve like ship to store capability, same day. And I've always been quite impressed by how quickly they've got to expand in that service. And now we're seeing it in the UK. We've got John Lewis, one of the biggest department stores, is doing a collab with Uber. They're focusing on some specific geographic areas for specific product types. They've done the modeling of what products, sell well in these areas. So I'd love to know where do you see last mile headed? Like what does good last mile delivery look like?
That's a really interesting question, because I think if you look at the last mile landscape in the US, there's been a couple really big changes that have happened around like UPS and FedEx. They used to have a partnership with USPS to handle the last mile, where UPS and FedEx would handle the majority of the lane, and then USPS would handle that last bit. USPS broke off that agreement because I think they realized how important last mile is. So UPS and FedEx no longer offer, it was called Smart Post and SurePost. Both those methods are now no longer applicable, because I think people are starting to realize that there's more validity to controlling that, because it's the parcel hitting the doorstep. The two last things that people or kind of the three last steps of a website they remember is the shipping before they click order, the email they get with the tracking information, and when the order arrives on the porch. Like those are like the three things that to us are like the core tenets of like a great website delivery, because it's all around the shipping. Like we can make the website as pretty as possible, but all they're going to remember is when that package hits the door and what's inside the package. So that being said, if you look at the regionals, it's a harder thing to stitch together in a consistent way, generally, because if you look at like an Uber, you have to book the account in 5 minutes. You have to have the sophistication to be able to what's what I'm looking for, to rank them of saying, hey, the dispatch time is this day, dispatch time, the delivery date is this time. About 7 years ago, we looked at integrating in Uber to BigCommerce, actually. So we did this as an exploratory exercise. And what we realized is for that mid-market merchant, the level of sophistication on like an OMS or a TMS just isn't there unless it's custom built. So if you look at like the Best Buy, they're building a solution that or the department store you mentioned, they're building a entire order flow to be able to recognize and route that, because you're booking a driver, you're booking James or booking Quentin to deliver that package, versus saying, hey, I'm going to give this to UPS. It's going to go to a facility. It's going to sort through. It's going to go to driver X, and then driver X is going to run his route. So if you look at that piece specifically there, the better way to look at it is there's companies that are out there, like, one's called Shipwise, for example, where they do that audit and that analysis, and they'll help stitch together like the lanes. So they'll say, hey, these are the regionals, and these are the last miles that you work with. Because generally the last mile couriers is working with somebody else within your supply chain, because you're not going to do, we're not as, well, maybe you could, but you're not going to do 90% and let the last mile do the last bit. So that's the piece where it kind of goes back to like one of those top questions, or review those lanes and what makes sense, and start to try to figure out, hey, can I get some effort from Roadie, for example? UPS acquired a last mile courier a couple of years ago that they've now fully got integrated into their product source. Like these bigger carriers have a way to serve that.
Yeah, no, I'm really interested in the collaboration space here, because there are so many different things happening around shipping and especially around customer experience and service of it, to give people that last mile experience, so that you don't end up with a disjoint between, hey, look, the website is beautiful and I feel all great and happy, to a carrier dumped a parcel down the side of a hedge and it's all soggy and crap, which has happened to me on a few occasions, even from luxury brands, which is not quite the premium experience. But we've got, I'm sure you probably come across them when you're dealing with like the merchants in the UK, is like concierge services. The retailers are working with like Harper Concierge, where they are providing like a white glove, a premium service to a specific subset of the audience. So it feels like it's fragmenting, but in a positive way, where there's I guess it's the modularity. There are different service elements you can use for specific use cases.
Yeah, I think it's really well said. A friend of mine worked at the Royal Osprey for a few years. I think I'm saying that correctly. I worked with them for a few years, and last time I was in London, I sat down, had lunch with him and the e-com team, and just talked about like what that could look like. And one of the things that they're a premier luxury brand. I don't know very many. I didn't know who they were, and then I couldn't unsee them once I realized who they were, because it was like, we make the jewelry for the Queen, all that good stuff.
they offer, well, they'll deliver it to you. Like they'll show up in like one of the really cool old town cars, and they'll drive and they'll hand deliver you that package. And it goes back to that experience, because there are certain things like, if you're buying a perfume of theirs, that can arrive in a nice box, and that can arrive by whatever courier service you want it to be. But if you're going to order, a gem, a jewel, a package goes over a certain dollar value, you want to be able to control that experience. So that those concierge services for like those higher dollar brands is one of the things that we're seeing people consider, is that, hey, our brand experience does not end on the website. It does not end when you open the box. In between those two steps is very important. Like, what are the couriers that you're going to be using? We work with some customers that have rules that say, if the package goes over a certain dollar value, hide USPS and only show UPS. Or if this order goes over a certain dollar value, only show signature required. And then we're going to discount that signature required in that overnight method, because it's cheaper for us to discount that than to have a chargeback issue of losing a $15,000 watch in transit.
Yeah, do you know what? When you were talking about that nice car delivery, hands delivered, it just instantly brought to mind the Amazon Prime van with its battered sides, driving up across the green in front of my house, blocking the road, and then some guy coming in, chucking a parcel at my front door and buggering off before I've even had to answer. Like, the contrast in the service quality is, I know Amazon can ship it fast and give you convenience, but damn, it doesn't do the experience of it.
Not at all. And that's one of the things they're looking to weaponize. Like, they're looking to weaponize their supply chain and become their own courier. And that's one of the things that they're working on right now. And, part of the conversations we're having right now with 3PLs is like, hey, we're getting really, really good rates from Amazon. How do we plug these in? Like, what does this actually look like? And it's very early days. Like, there's not an API for it. It's a table rate. So there's this level to me of looking at it and saying, like, what's the longevity of this, and what's the maturity of it? Sure, the packages are going to arrive because, yeah, exactly. The Amazon guy is going to show up. In our neighborhood, we have the problem where there's my address and somebody else's address is one digit different, and she gets more of my mail than I get, and she doesn't like me for that, but she's not mad at me for it because there's nothing we can do. So it's like every once a week I go walk up there and, hi, I'm so nice. Sorry to see you, Miss Rhonda. I really appreciate it. Yeah. And she's just like, have a word with the driver. I was like, I will, I promise. But it just comes down to that, if you're ordering a spatula or you're ordering, an electric kettle, that's okay to do that. But if you're going to spend, 500 pounds or something like that over it, then it's got to be at the right door at least.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. Or not shut. I mean, I had one parcel. It was actually one of my wife's birthday presents, and they've stuck it inside the rubbish bin. And this is the rubbish bin that we put our dog poo bags in. So it had a fragrance to it when it came out. And this thing is so you, as a brand, if you don't understand how people deliver, if you're not checking what it looks like and feels like to receive from the different couriers, you can soon get a really alienated customer base who are not getting the experience they want. But no. Let's move on to, because I'd like to look specifically more about ShipperHQ, because you guys got a really solid reputation. You work with quite an incredible range of brands. So I want to talk about three different things. It's about partnerships and how that's evolving, product, and then your new ship to store. So let's look at the partnership network first. I'd love to know, I love seeing when leading vendors, what they're doing in terms of plugging in other tech. So how have this changed? What are the new carrier partnerships? What are the new technology partnerships that you've either built and launched or are focusing on now?
Yeah, I think a couple of the carriers that sort of jump to mind for me right now is obviously DHL. Like I mentioned at the top of the call, so we partner with DHL Ecommerce. DHL is they're the market maker for international shipping. They're sort of the creme de la creme of that. And as we looked at as you look at the headache of what it is to calculate dues and taxes, UPS has their own rate, has their own API for it. FedEx does, but you have to use their carriers. And one of the things as a platform that we really focus on is being agnostic. We don't want to be the end all be all technology. We want to be really good at what we do, and that's power a shipping experience on a website, and that's it. Like our big goal is we never want to try to own end to end. We don't want to be the front and the back. We want people to have the freedom to choose what the back is. And partnering with DHL eCommerce gave us this ability to give a generic duties and taxes rate across any courier that you would like. So I think that's probably the partnership I'm most proud of for this year, because, hey, we're giving people the ability to have an agnostic approach. So you don't have to change your supply chain. You don't have to dictate different carriers. I'm not going to make those decisions for you. I'm giving you the ability to make decisions how you'd like to make them. So I think that's probably our best carrier partnership so far to date this year.
And you said earlier about you'd looked and explored at doing an integration on Uber for BigCommerce. What about the technology side? Are there any new technology partnerships that you're building out?
Yeah, so I guess, platform wise, we've adopted Shopware. So Shopware is an open source platform, pretty popular in Europe. It's starting to gain some traction over here in the US. So as far as like the platform network, we've expanded into that. And then as far as the rest of it, that's one of the things we're focused on for the second half of the year. So for us, we're looking at one of the nice things about our platform is remaining agnostic. We're able to touch a lot of other solutions in there's no friction that's there. We use the platform as the host. We pass the data in that. We have APIs that can extend that down. But two of the areas that I'm really looking to partner with more, and we're actually going to an event called Parcel Forum here in a couple of weeks, is like the OMS and TMS networks. Like how can we get more of our data in the back end? We're making these decisions in a place that's never really made in the checkout. So how do we start to flow down that data to cut down on some like those operational times? So those are a couple of things we're excited about. And then just working with new carriers. So Worldwide Express owns a handful of carrier networks. We launched a really nice partnership with them. We have every one of their APIs. So from there, it used to be called Ceresys, and now to they have Unishippers. So from that small package all the way to LTL, we're starting to see some of those other brands come alive, say, hey, we need to get hip. We need to get in with e-com. So, we're sort of the spearhead for some of those carriers like that joining. Interesting.
And the big announcement recently is from a product roadmap point of view, you launched Ship to Store. So do you want to talk us through I've got two bits to this question. The first bit is, how does your Ship to Store work? What does it mean for merchants? And then I think it would come to the second bit. It was like, what is your advice for merchants interested in this? Because Ship to Store has got wider operational considerations as well. So let's talk us through the feature, how it works, what functionality you're offering people.
Yeah. So the impetus to build this was we work with a company that sells ammunition, and ammunition is a very, very tricky ammunition in the whole 2A space, firearms, all that good stuff. It's hard to ship. It's very restricted. So it's important that you have the compliance in place. And that's what we do for a lot of those retailers. For these customers in particular, you can't send, and this is just a fun fact for everybody, you can't send ammo directly to a residential location in the state of New York. And so the challenge that we got as this client was migrating from Magento 2 to Shopify was, hey, we built this custom solution that did this on Magento 2. We don't want to bring over this tech debt. We don't want to build this into it. ShipperHQ, here's the pitch we're throwing you. Can you hit it or not? And what we looked at and said was, okay, cool. So we have the ability to calculate from multiple warehouses. We have store pickup. We can calculate carriers. Like let's whiteboard out this problem, see how we can solve it. And so what we delivered to them is the ability for them to set these pickup locations as destinations and saying what carriers are going to deliver to that. So the use case for them in particular was, hey, I have certain items that can't go to a residential location. Let's show the closest pickup locations where they can. So we built that for that. It's going really well for the firearm space, but to kind of broaden that conversation out, Ship to Store is not a feature for everybody. Kind of requires you to have some brick and mortar presence. If you don't have brick and mortar presence, there's other carrier services like UPS Access Point or FedEx Hold at Location that can give you a very similar look and feel. You ship your package to a signed off store by somebody in those networks, and you can pick it up from there. It's a really nice thing. It's kind of like the parcel network. That's how we have it. But instead of it being, the locker network, instead of it being a locker, you're going to like your local convenience stores, CVS, Walgreens to go pick up your package. That works for customers that only, maybe have one store, have no presence. If you have multiple stores, you absolutely have the opportunity to drive foot traffic to your store. Hey, come pick it up in your store. I think that's one of the things I think Nordstrom does really well is, hey, you can pick it up in the store and then you're going to have to wander down. You're going to have to walk down you're going to have to walk down or walk up, depending on how your mall is shaped, to get to where you pick up your package. So with this, you have the ability to drive more foot traffic to your location to try to get that dollar value up. So, hey, I might need to grab the sunglasses as I'm walking to go pick up my jacket. So there's some ideas of how to kind of route run people into it, but you're absolutely correct. You're starting to get into a level of sophistication outside of general tech stack that's readily off the shelf available for an e-commerce platform, Shopify, BigCommerce, Magento, any of them. Because we're starting to get into that level of sophistication where, people need, yourself or they need Paul's help to stitch that solution together. So for those customers in particular, they have to start looking at the inventory. They have to start looking about like the delivery date. They have to start thinking about which carriers they want to deliver that to. So this is one of the things for, if you have 10 locations, absolutely use this as a leverage to drive traffic to.
Yeah, I'm always intrigued by the adoption of this because I'm having a conversation with someone at the moment. They want to do more omni-channel shipping from online into store. and they're unifying with Shopify's solution with POS in stores, so that you got the unified customer orders. But actually, one of the biggest challenges in store is operational readiness for receiving parcels.
Yep.
And knowing where the parcels are stored and how those parcels are retrieved and what that customer experience is. And if you're in a small store and it's like peak and it's busy and people are trying to sell, like how would you then get the collection working alongside the normal selling? When you work with like retailers on this, what are you seeing the big challenges? Is the main challenge around the operational side? Is it more about integration with existing tech?
From the vantage point that we speak to, I think it's more of the integration side, but you're absolutely hitting on the exact part of like where does that package go? Like we one time did a ship to store order for I think it was Abercrombie and Fitch for like a pair of jeans, and the package arrived. They knew it. They couldn't find it. Like they didn't know where they put it. They were like, "Hey, full transparency, we just lost it. It's somewhere in the store. We're going to find it," because they're not used to having that solution that's there. So I think there's the technical connective tissue to route the order, but then you do run into like the physical piece of like, where do you store this? What does it look like? So if you look at like in the States here, like Target or Walmart, they're starting to shrink some of the shopping footprint in the store to power more click and collect. So if I think of my local Target, there's usually the whole, hey, you go to the counter, behind the counter, there's whatever there is, there's shelves and stuff like that, and they come back out with your package. One of the Targets here in Austin, if you look to your right, there's a whole sort of like fenced off section that's now effectively a mini warehouse within their store, because they need the ability to scaffold, they need the ability to sort. So for some of those, depending on your volume of it, you're going to have to look to give away some of your retail selling space, because now you're at the point of you're getting orders without having to consider the hourly wages of the overall operating of the store. You have to think about, who's the attendee that's going to be working our little mini warehouse within it. So those are some of the things that customers do get to. It's absolutely an issue. Generally on that side of things, we tend to kind of shake hands and go, "Hey, cool, let me know when you need help with the website," kind of it. But that's absolutely something that comes up from a shipping perspective. Like we'll talk to agencies like you guys about it, and it's one of the things we'll spitball and chat. What have you heard that's well? What have you heard that's not? And there's a couple of scanning systems that people have recommended that do a good job to it, but I think it just depends on your scale. I mean, even just knowing, hey, we put that over there and we have our sorting buckets, that's better than the experience we had where they said, "Hey, the package is somewhere in here, we have to find it."
Yeah. Yeah, and the ultimate evolution for this is the combination of locker systems with in-store shipping, where in bigger stores you have a dedicated area which has a locker cabinet and codes through your phone that open up the lockers to get your parcel, and then it doesn't take away from the site. Because one of the big disruptions in store is retail staff, their primary focus is on selling, not on helping people to collect orders or then having to reprocess an order when someone's picked up and said, "Actually, I don't want it anymore." So the more you can take heat away from the retail teams through automation and leave them to like walk the floor, I think the better.
But it's funny too, because the businesses, they want that experience. They're like, "Hey, just come pick it up." They want that, like, "Hey, you work that concierge counter, you have that, go walk around the store and then come find us at the concierge counter," because at that point, it's less overhead for it. But then that starts to kind of lead you into this idea of, what's more important, the in-store experience of shopping or the in-store experience of picking things up. And that's where, I think IKEA is one of the people that I tend to look at from like an aspirational perspective, because their goal is to put you in that rat race. You're going to walk around and then you're going to end up buying a fake plant, and you have no idea why you're going to have a fake plant, but you're going to check out with a fake plant. And you're going to come home with it and you'll be like, "Why'd you buy that?" And like, "I don't know. I kind of got spun around, ate some meatballs, and I have this plant now." One of the things that they're doing here in the state, in Austin specifically, is they have like a mini store where it's just pick up. So, hey, the experience, but hey, just come pick it up from us. Don't drive, because they're usually generally outside of town. But to me, they're thinking of omnichannel in a much different way, because it's another brick and mortar. But let's rethink what that experience is. Let's rethink that pickup experience and how that looks, and what do we actually stock there? We have the hits there. We have the dressers that everyone knows and loves that you get when you're in uni or right after you're out and you want to look fancy. That's what they store there. That's it. Anything else past that, it's going to be ordered and it can be picked up from there. But it's inside the city versus being on the outskirts. Yeah. That to me, as I start to think about that whole, what's the warehouse within the store? How do you fragment that with still giving that same experience? Because there still is that element that probably the fake plant is in that small store. I haven't gone in there yet. I'm not buying many IKEA furniture anytime soon. I'm full on baby furniture, but that's who I think is doing a really interesting job at that.
Yeah, that's a really good gauge point. I mean, you've triggered me as well because IKEA gives me nightmares because it's the antithesis of the shopping experience I like, and I'm not denigrating them because I know they are exceptionally good at what they do, and they've invested a lot in their digital tech from where they were maybe 3-5 years ago. But yeah, there's a local one to us where actually it's the collection is not separate to the store, but they've dedicated a completely separate part off the side of the store with its own entrance, so it doesn't block up the entry and exit of the main store to service those people and get them in and out quicker. So actually, it's way better than having to go into a specific place within a store, get through all the store traffic, wait, get your thing, get back out through all the store traffic as well. So yeah, I think experience is the future battleground for this. But I could sit and ask you a load more questions, but I'm not going to take up all of your time because I know you're a busy man. If anyone listening wants to find out a bit more about like ShipperHQ, what it can do, how it could potentially help them to improve the way they manage their shipping online, what's the best way to reach out?
Yeah, I mean, ShipperHQ.com is a great way to go. My email address is Quentin@ShipperHQ.com, Quentin. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, shoot me an email. Like I said, my job is, we're a merchant-driven organization in the sense that our roadmap is not think tank. We're not a YC Combinator. No offense to those guys and gals. We build what people need. Like that story of, hey, we got the challenge. That's what we built. So, give me your situations, give me your use cases. That's how we're building, and that's what our future looks like. What do our customers want? What are they asking us for? We're going to keep building for them, and they're going to help keep our lights on.
Amazing. Look, Quentin, always enjoy talking to you. Always enjoy your expertise. So thank you for joining us. I'm sure our listeners have got a lot of value from it. I look forward to the next one.
Yeah, hopefully not do it in 4 years. Not pushing to be a guest anytime sooner, but we should talk before 4 years.
Definitely. Take care. Have a lovely day, sir.
Thank you, James.
You're listening to the Inside Commerce podcast hosted by experienced consultants James Gerd and Paul Rogers. Inside Commerce is your fast track to digital knowledge, featuring interviews with leading e-commerce retailers, industry thought leaders, and the C-suite of key tech companies to explore the latest in digital strategy, customer experience, and tech. Discover what the latest trends really mean and get practical advice based on experience to help fine-tune your e-com strategy and tech stack. Follow us on LinkedIn and reach out to James or Paul if you'd like to discuss an e-commerce project. We hope you enjoy the latest episode.